Hi, 6th grade. This is Mrs. Daywall. Today we're going to be multiplying fractions. If you have your yellow packet, please get it out and turn to page 2. If you don't, feel free to write the problems down and do the problems with me on a piece of notebook paper. So the first thing I have to make sure I have when I multiply fractions is that I have all fractions. I can't multiply anything until I have all fractions. So if you have whole numbers or mixed numbers, or sometimes called mixed fractions, you can change them to all fractions before you start. And we'll do some examples of that in a little bit. But today, for this one, we're just going to do just fractions. So we're starting with 1/3 times 3/5. So the first thing you do is, once you have all fractions, you multiply numerator times numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. And then denominator times denominator. And 3 times 5 is 15. Once you're done with that, we're going to simplify. I like the word simplify better than reduce, or put it in lowest terms. And 3/15. I have to find a common factor for 3 and 5. When I simplify fractions, I find a common factor, as I always say. 3 divided by 3 and 15 divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and that would be my final answer. The next problem I can do is 6/7 times 2/3. First thing I'm going to do, numerator times numerator. 6 times 2 is 12. Denominator times denominator. 7 times 3 is 21. Once again, this number can be simplified. This fraction can be simplified. And I always say, when you think it might not be able to be simplified, always check 3, because 3 is the one that tricks a lot of people. And what do you know? These can both be divided by 3. 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4. And 21 divided by 3 is 7. And my answer is 4/7. And the last problem is 3/8 times 2/9. 3 times 2, numerator times numerator, is 6. Denominator times denominator is 72. And I think I'm finished with that one, but I know they're both even. So I think I might have a common factor. This is where it starts to get tricky, and I'm actually going to wait on that one, and we're going to come to it when we get to the next part. So it can be simplified, but sometimes when the numbers get bigger, simplifying gets a little tricky. So we're going to come back to that one in a minute. I'm going to show you an easier way to solve them when solve the multiplication of fractions when the numbers start to get a little bit longer and bigger and stretchier. So I can find a common factor by simplifying before I multiply. So divide diagonally is another way of saying it. And I always say simplify before you multiply. Cross simplify before you multiply. And you basically cross simplify, so diagonally across. So 3 and 3 have a common factor. I see I have a 3 here and I have a 3 here. The common factor for 3 and 3 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. If you divide them both by the same number, a common factor, you simplify before you multiply. So now I can do multiplication. 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 5 is 5, and I have my final answer. In this problem, it wasn't really that much easier, and same thing with example 2. Common factor for 7 and 2, only 1, so that's not going to work. How about 6 and 3? Oh yeah, I know, 6 and 3 have a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And now I can simply multiply across. 2 times 2 is 4. 7 times 1 is 7. 4/7 is my final answer. Last problem, example 3, does get easier if you cross simplify before you multiply, because the numbers start to get bigger. So let's find a common factor for 8 and 2. Common factor for 8 and 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And I can also cross simplify 3 and 9. I have a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And now I can simply multiply across. Numerator times numerator. 1 times 1 is 1. And denominator times denominator. 4 times 3 is 12. And now I have my final answer. Looking back up at 6/72, I could have done it quickly if I had known that a common factor for both of these is 6. And then I would have gotten the answer. But sometimes we might not recognize that 72 divided by 6 is 12. So if you cross simplify before you multiply, it does make it a bit easier. Next, we're moving down the page and we're going to be doing some multiplying mixed numbers. So if I have any mixed numbers or whole numbers in my problem, I have to change them to all fractions first. So I have 1/3 times 1 1/2. So the first thing I have to do is convert any mixed numbers to improper fractions. And I like to make my little arrow with my multiplication sign down bottom and my addition sign up top. And when we work in algebra, we start to work more moving down the page. So I would like you to put the answer to that below it. So 2 times 1 plus 1, 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and that becomes our numerator, and then denominator stays the same. And then the other one is already a fraction, so we don't have to do anything. And now we go back to what we learned previously. Numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. You can cross simplify if you want to. In this case, I don't think you really have to. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. And then I can also simplify 3/6. I have a common factor of 3. And it would simplify to 1/2 is my answer. Next problem, change them all to fractions first. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. I get 6/5. That is equal to 1 1/5. And 2/3 is already fractions. So once again, I could probably do this one without simplifying before I multiply, but I'm going to simplify before I multiply. If I simplify before I multiply, I find a common factor for 3 and 6, and it would be 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now, numerator times numerator, 4. Denominator times denominator, over 5. Make sure that you're pausing it and trying it on your own. The next one, I'm going to have you pause and try to convert it on your own, and then check it with me. So pause it right now, do the problem, and then check your answer with me. Okay, hopefully you paused it, and you ended up with 3/4 times 2 times 3 plus 1 is 7/3. And I don't really know if I want to work with big numbers, but I'm going to do it this way. 3 times 7 is 21. 4 times 3 is 12. And I'm stuck with 21/12. Now, if you did that, what's wrong with that? It is improper. When you get to algebra, improper fractions are okay. But in 6th grade math, usually we would convert that to a mixed number. Before I convert it to a mixed number, I think I'm going to simplify it by dividing by 3 to get 7/4, because now I'm working with a smaller number, or smaller digits anyway. And remember, when I convert 7/4, top number goes on the inside, and 7 goes on the inside, and 4 goes on the outside. And when I do this, I'm going to do 4 divided into 7. There it goes one time. When I multiply, 4 times 1, I get 4. I subtract, I get 3. And then the numerator, the remainder becomes the numerator. And the denominator stays the same as it was over here. So the denominator is also the divisor right here. And it becomes a 4. So it's 1 3/4. You could have also done that by simplifying before you multiplied. If you would have simplified before you multiplied, you would have had the 7/4 originally. So both of these answers are correct, but this one is the simplified. 1 3/4 is the simplified answer. Just because I can, I'm going to do one more problem with you today, and this is going to be one with a whole number and a mixed number. So if I had 5, this will be example 4, and please write this problem down. If I had 5 times 2 1/2. If I had this problem, I would need to start by changing everything to a fraction, and every whole number, and actually every integer, can be changed to a fraction by just putting it over 1. So 5/1 times 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5/2. So I would get 5/1 times 5/2, and now I can multiply it. Numerator times numerator is 25/2. And then I would have to simplify that by top number goes on the inside, 25 on the inside, 2 on the outside. If you're doing this without a calculator, it can be kind of tricky, so take your time. 2 divided by 2, it goes in one time. I multiply, I'm going to run out of room here. I'm going to get a remainder of 0. There, get a little bit more room. There we go. And I bring down my 5. And now 2, it goes into 5 2 times. And then 2 times 2 is 4. I subtract, I get a remainder of 1. The remainder now, since I have nothing else to do, I can rewrite the remainder as a fraction. And then the denominator stays the same. So the final answer would be 12 and 1/2 would be my final answer. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on multiplying fractions today, and keep multiplying. Have a great day.